Good, pretty good.
All right, that's a kind of energy. You guys know all that together. All right, so we've got, we're calling the meeting to order. It's the Thursday, February 10th, 2022 meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. First thing we have on our agenda is a project rating discussion question. So, a little background on this. We're looking to get feedback from the members of the steering committee on how we can basically present or brand an initiative for planning, and maybe more broadly, just an economic revitalization initiative for the city, so that it's a recognizable thing. So when you see the logo, when you see the name, you know, oh, that's the city of Nacogdoches. They must be doing something with development or dealing with infrastructure projects. It's going to be something hopefully recognizable. So PowerPoint here we're going to go through. Hopefully this is the arrow.
Yeah.
So when I first heard this, I was a little bit confused at the purpose, but hopefully I'll try to make it clear. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Clearly, the brand is not going to be necessarily indicative itself of the vision. It's going to be something that you see as a logo, you see as a name, and you understand what it stands for, but it's not necessarily going to in itself touch on everything we're trying to do as far as the city. The examples here that were used. So we talked about this with some of the consultants the other day in the conference call. And they gave us some examples of how cities they've worked with have decided, okay, we're going to have some sort of overarching name for our planning process. And two examples they gave us were they worked with the city of Las Cruces, and they had I think they ended up going with Elevate Las Cruces, but the other one was Las Cruces 2050. So it's kind of an idea, and you may have seen that in some other cities. I think in Galena County, Lufkin is using Lufkin Forward. Is that what they're doing?
Yeah,
It's pretty generic, yes, but we can do better than that. But the idea is to have something, and I know the Elevate thing, if you're a member of the Alumni Association over at SFA, they're using that right now for their capital campaign. So that might be off the table. Just to give you an idea of what we mean by branding. The Elevate SFA, oh, they're asking. So that's not probably a good thing.
We are also using the Elevate, the old university building.
Oh, yeah.
Like that would be two of them.
Oh, yeah.
Branding. So either everybody needs to be elevated. We've got one of the consultants or in the contract for planning, Civic Brand, I believe is their name. And one of the things that they're supposed to do in the contract is come up with this branding idea, or basically produce the materials that are going to be used for and so one of the things that they've asked us to do is get feedback from our committees on basic things like what things should we avoid, what things should we not include in a brand, what colors, what words, what concepts, what things do you think we should include? And so we're not necessarily doing their job for them. We're just trying to give them some, and we don't want to do the job for them. We want them to come back and present us with some ideas that, we can approve through the city council. And, but we want to give them some feedback to make their ideas better. In fact. So there's some questions on a survey that we're going to take about 5 minutes to fill out. Just to give some ideas, that's what type of
Nice.
so I was going to go through the questions real quick, but I know you all they're on the sheet in front of you. There are two ideas here. You like the city date format, last week 2015, you like the concept and city format. Or you might like something else. If there's something else you would prefer, you could write that. We want something that is not, I was talking with Steele here earlier. We want something that people see, they can identify. Hopefully it makes them go, hey, yeah, we have some plans and we're doing something good. And is gonna inspire kind of involvement from the community. And so we don't want something that's derivative necessarily. We want something kind of unique, something that would embody Nacogdoches. So question 2, we've got some themes in our call the other day. And these are some possibilities about different terms that can be used in the name. We talked about the idea of coming together, unifying, becoming one Nacogdoches, kind of either having a vision or building or starting something new. Nagor being Louisiana, Texas, with historic or authentic as a kind of a concept. We talked about elevating or improving or renewing earlier. And then at the end here, we've got possibility of evolving, changing, or growing. And then lastly, basically a branding strategy that would say, hey, everybody get involved. Come tell us what you think. And so if you have any thoughts about any of these themes on your paper?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Historic authentic is not on this.
Oh, it's not?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're right.
Yeah.
I apologize. That was a typo. We just need to be.
So if there's one of those that you find preferable, go ahead and I'm going to do this part.
So are we just doing this as a survey, or can we
Yeah.
discuss this
We can discuss.
together? I think it's helpful to hear. And
Yeah.
instead of just, I mean, this is just like a,
Yeah, you can discuss it. We're looking to get some, kind of individual feedback from people, but I don't have any problem discussing it. Do you have any thoughts, like as far as branding goes? So
you go first, Kurt, you had your hand up, but,
Well, no, you,
well,
Catherine.
so one of the things that I'm wondering about is if, yeah, I've looked at other branding stuff on other comprehensive plans, and I always get concerned with the ones that look like they're just about this right now, because we're going to invest a whole lot of money. I'd really like to be able to use those materials. For example, when we have a festival, people can wear their festival shirt, and if we're going to give out shirts, they can. So that's one of the things that
it's something that's like evergreen. It's not going to be
right, and that
months from now going to be.
and that actually talks about Nacogdoches versus the planner. You know what I mean? Because some of them are, like when it says it plans, then you're talking about a planner kind of instead of who we are.
Yeah.
I was just,
I like the little can't hesitate to make comments while people are still going out there.
And I'll just get to say, so we talk about like name city format versus, year city. Using a name and city combination really allows that engagement brand to live on beyond the projects. And so maybe a year isn't best if we want to use that. We want to continue using that branding scheme long term. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of the year, I feel like that got really in vogue around the time that it became the 21st century. You saw a lot of like the 2010 initiative or whatever, which that all, and then the 2010 passes and then. So it almost becomes a joke if you're not meeting, if it feels like it's not 2010 is approaching and you're not achieving your goals, right? So I think, in my opinion, I don't like the number unless it's a very far out number.
Ken, the only thing I say to that with regard to the city date versus name and city
Yeah.
is that, part of our process is to review the 2003 plan.
Yes.
So 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now, when people are discussing this, somebody, the benefit, not the only benefit, but a benefit that I can see by using city and date, for example, what we're doing now would be, I guess, Nacogdoches 2022. The benefit there would be that it would keep people directed appropriately with what we're doing now versus, say, somebody went back and 10 years from now and looked at the 2003 plan, it would keep the two separate. If that's a good idea. Part of me says that is because
Yeah.
of.
Here's another way to think of it. This is how I was thinking of it, is as far as a concept or a branding concept goes, you've got one thing like, and please interrupt me. You've got maybe since we're not going to use it, let's say it's Elevate Nacogdoches, right? If you had that as a concept, there's no reason you couldn't be using that in 2050. But I think underneath that, if it's 2050, you probably had multiple iterations or revisions of planning and possibly new plans or infrastructure plans that have happened. And so, but maybe we want to move the concept of city kind of future planning away from the actual plan.
Time period.
Done. Yeah. And so you would still have you're still going to have a 2022 or 2023 comprehensive plan review committee at some point in the future, which I will not be on. Would be at the nursing home. But we'll, because I think that you need to refer to it as, this is when it was last done, that's the one we're talking about. How else do you single it out?
And Ken, I just want to clarify, so this isn't meant to be like the name of the actual comprehensive plan document that gets adopted. This is just a graphic package to help us communicate to the public and facilitate that community engagement process. It's not necessarily going to be the name of the final product, the final update that gets adopted. So I just want to make sure that we're not confusing the two.
Right. And that's kind of what I was leading towards.
That makes sense.
Yeah, is that eventually, you're going to have this, I would think that whatever the name of it, if it's Elevate Nacogdoches and that's why I would shy away from a number, is it's hopefully going to be a kind of a concept that would be something that could be used at the Blueberry Festival 10 years from now for another event. At any time we're looking for civic engagement, or we're looking at doing some new development, or city council's got something they want people to give feedback on. That could be the logo or to identify that.
Yes, so this could be an engagement brand for future civic engagement work as well. that we just want to create a distinction between some of our other city initiatives, so this kind of stands out on its own and people recognize it whenever they get an email or see it on Facebook or see the materials. So yeah, sure.
So one of the reasons I like discussions is because there may be something that doesn't fit into like even number one. You've given us two choices. You know, do the city date or do a name in a city. Whereas you might want to say something like Nacogdoches, ever old, ever new, or something like that, that doesn't quite fit in that format that combines two things. So, you know, I think getting the concepts may be something. I'm just throwing that out as a discussion kind of
So question would,
thing.
I'd like this next slide.
Sure.
So I think we can answer some of the questions as we go through. So maybe if we just kind of go through some more slides, maybe we'll answer some of the questions that you may have. So if you see something on here that doesn't fit, feel free, I want you to write your own. So if you have an idea, a theme or some sort of combination that you think would be good, just feel free to write in. These are just some suggestions and prompts to give you some ideas, but it's not necessarily you have to select those.
Well, and I think the first question is more of a kind of the feedback on that opening, kind of guide the consultants in a way where they can go, okay, well, more people would not like a date name format, which is probably more generic. So we'll give them some kind of guidance. Yeah, Larry, go ahead.
This kind of goes on with what Kathleen said about discussion. What are these going to be used for? What will these pieces of paper that we all fill out, they're going to be collected somewhere by somebody, and then what? Is it going to come back to us for a discussion and talking about it?
So this is going to Civic Brand to give them basically some ideas from you all as kind of the chosen representatives of your of the groups you represent, to give some ideas about what would be things we should avoid, what are things you like, to kind of give them just feedback. I don't think this is going to be dispositive in the way that they're going to look at this and go, okay, we're going to go with, you know, this name. But I think this is just designed to give them some idea.
Okay, and that's what I'm trying to find out. So they're going to take this, get some idea, and then what?
Well, they're going to probably prepare a proposal to send back to city council, I would assume.
So the proposal would go directly from these things we fill out to the city council, to the city council.
I don't know, I'm not mitigating that issue, I'm just doing a survey.
And
You break it down to brass tacks if you like.
No, the point is,
It's gonna email who and.
I think the point is what Kathleen brought up is where's the discussion? If our only input is surveys, I could fill this out in an email. If you send me an email and I can fill this out. If we're not going to discuss it and there's not going to be any interaction, it's just going to go to them and then to the city council.
Well, so this is just to get some initial, I think, ideas to make hopefully the proposals that come back better, I think. So I don't think this is intended to be a complicated process. It's just supposed to be, hey, here's some thoughts that people who live in the city that we're supposed to be planning for would have.
Well, and I'm not even asking if it's a complicated process. I'm asking if it's the end of the process,
This is the beginning of the process.
filling this out.
I think the beginning of the process started a year ago.
Well, I'm talking about this specific process.
I just don't know what your question is, I guess.
My question is this. I fill this out. It goes to Civic Brands.
Mhm.
And then what?
Yeah,
It goes to the city council?
I do not know.
Okay.
I do not know.
Because then that way, I mean, none of us would know, if it just went straight to them, none of us would have any feedback or any discussion about what they would be presenting to the city council.
Councilwoman, would you have a Any feedback on that point?
Well, this is new to me, but what I would say is, I think one of the values of having a steering committee with so many people with so many different backgrounds is to have these rich discussions rather than to just have tallies. So I think, even though I think your point is well taken, we're having a discussion, I think hearing, well, what about this? Or maybe we should think outside the box a little bit. Maybe we need to, and talking about it helps us all think better.
Yeah, and
More clearly.
I want to clarify, so the contract that was approved by city council, then that scope, it tasked ECJ and their team with developing this branding. So that's part of the services that they're providing to the city, is using that expertise to develop that branding for us. Of course, in conjunction with the city, they want our input because no one knows Nacogdoches like we do. And so they don't want to just come up with something without getting input, without talking to those people who have been selected to represent those other groups in Nacogdoches. And so this isn't meant to be a design by committee. It's just essentially meant to get some preliminary feedback and ideas that we can share with the consultant to help them in developing that. And then the project team will do that. And I think basically we're just trying to give them a couple of things to build off of versus them just kind of coming up with something on their own. I know that I think there may be some confusion about the different roles of the committee.
I think Mario actually has the answer over there.
So kind of, hopefully,
Yeah.
my ask is just
Yeah.
there's no reason to have tension here. The whole premise behind the exercise.
Well, they have tension. I mean,
Oh, I don't mind tension. Creating tension is great. It helps us.
hold on a second. I kind of feel that, Larry, I saw the last council meeting where the thing was approved, and I know some people in here were very adamant about the whole process, not going forward, essentially, with DTJ. Which is fine. But is that where you're coming from?
No, where I'm coming from is,
I was just like honesty and openness, because
well, I'm being honest and open as I can be right now, okay? Where I'm coming from is this. If we're trying to, and I've done branding and I've done branding research. But filling out this and then sending it to the company and us never seeing it again until it goes to city council is not branding research, I can tell you that.
Okay.
And I'm asking
What you like, what involvement would you like?
well, it's fine to fill this out, but as Kathleen said, we need to discuss what the findings are. And talk about what does this mean? And is it really what we want? And after they design it, it should come back to us and we should take a look at it. And say, that's what we need and want.
Okay, so you want to be included in the process.
Right. That's what branding research does.
To be honest with you, I don't know what the process is at this point.
So let me clarify, because Mario and I just talked about this.
And I'll just be honest with y'all. I felt a little bit put off that there were a lot of people at city council speaking. I think we should all just be honest about our positions. This is an open space where we can be honest. I think there are a lot of people that were very vehement about their opposition, which is good. I have no problem with that. But I don't want it to be this kind of undercurrent. If you're opposed, just say you're opposed.
And I don't think what I said was vehement. I just think I expressed an opinion and that I have the right to express an opinion because
I didn't say you didn't. And so do I. So I'm just telling you how I feel. I would like this to be, if we're not going to say what we mean, then this group is pointless.
I said what I meant.
So let me clarify this. So first of all, I actually voted against that, as you well know, but I'm here and I think everybody else here, it wants to have a good product. If we're going to invest this amount of money, we want to have the best product possible. And I don't know anybody here who does not agree with that. So I think that's not, and do you want to add to that or, and then I want to.
Finish and then, if Mr. Chairman give me the floor, I'll make my comment. Go ahead.
Okay, so anyway, I think what Larry was asking is, So part of what I do when I fill out surveys, it may be because we're in academia and we're used to surveys then dictating a certain path. What he was asking, is it going to come back and are we going to have another discussion? Or is it just going to go? And yes, Mario said it will come back here. And so then we'll be able to discuss it possibly with 3 or 4 different alternatives or some other way.
And that was all.
And that's all he was asking. And so that is the answer to the question. Yes, it'll come back to us. So we'll all be able to discuss it and think about, do we like this first, this, that, the colors, like, I have no idea what colors and, but there's a bigger discussion, like, does the city have a color? I mean, it would make a difference to me. So that's the reason to have discussions rather than just fill out surveys. So, if the city has a color, then by all means, let's use the city's color. I don't know. Do we have blue? Do we have a color? Do we have a city color or something? Like purple is SFA. Do we have? Yeah, but it's
When in doubt,
the flag. Pardon?
we pick blue a lot. When in
Okay, so that makes a difference. So anyway, these are all things you have to talk about. So that's all that, and
We're at the initial stage
Right.
of just trying to gather some basic information. So, it's not a,
it's okay.
it's pretty, and I'm just doing this because I was asked to do it, not because I work for Civic Brands or.
You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. Don't worry about it.
I'm just telling
These are
you.
questions.
There's definitely I don't want there to be this like feeling of kind of an undercurrent, because I perceive it, and of, some people are upset, I think, with what's happening. And I think we need to be honest about how we feel. And, I would hope everybody in here would say the same thing they would on Facebook, face to face. So that's all I'm saying. And I think it'll be helpful if we get everybody's honest input in here, that we're going to get everywhere else. That's all I'm saying.
I would encourage us to, the city's made the decision to move forward. And so I would encourage us to get past that and move forward with the process. The idea of debating the rationale in the past, that we're past that. So I would encourage us to move forward. Ken, I think you're doing a great job and I appreciate your efforts, and I would encourage you to continue to do so. That's my comment. Right.
Worry about it, Ken.
My question is, is this brand that we're discussing here now, does it incorporate the downtown plan, or is it going to be that as well? I'm a little bit confused.
Yes, that's a great question. So, based on the feedback from Mario, I think what's going to happen is we'll gather all this input, we'll give it to the consultant, they'll come back with some ideas for the various committees to discuss. And so I think there are 2 different processes, and we do want to identify the comp plan versus the downtown plan, but there's going to be some overlap in that public engagement. So how do we create something that is common? And maybe the conversation they come back is, okay, we want something that looks similar, but 2 things that are distinct. Those are conversations that we can have whenever they come back with some ideas, but we don't even have anything to use as a discussion point. So the idea is they're going to use this, come back with some ideas, we'll present to the committees, get some additional feedback. Maybe it's 1 kind of branding scheme, maybe it ends up being 2. So that way there is more distinction between the comp plan process versus the downtown process. We don't know yet. We're just trying to gather some of that preliminary feedback just to give them some ideas to help them generate some visuals for us to come back and discuss later. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think the answer is that there may be one brand that incorporates it all, or there may be 2 separate brands, one for the comprehensive plan and one for the downtown plan, or any. Okay.
If I may, I would think that at the end, call myself I'm not going to speak. Well, because it's your process.
No, you need.
My thoughts are honestly at the end, when the project's all said and done, it's one document, right? It's one document with multiple chapters, multiple sections, appendices. I mean, it's a document, it's a full blown, that is one document. In other words, that is one, it is the comprehensive land use, and again, I know I'm not very creative, comprehensive land use and downtown plan, 2030, 2050, whatever you want to call it, that is one unified document. I think the premise is they are two distinct processes, right? I mean, we've got a committee established for this process, we've got a committee established for the other, and they're just very different dynamics. They're just different groups. I mean, they're just very different because one's confined to downtown, this was much larger. And so, and again, I'm just saying, because like yesterday's process was a tour of downtown. It wasn't like this. It was a tour downtown. We had about 30, 25 minutes or so of conversation like this. And then there was a tour. And so who knows what that feedback will be like about what specifically they may do. And then this may be completely different. And so I think that the premise is, while they're two distinct processes, at the end of the day, it'll be one unified document at the end. But there is some distinction because there's just two different types of processes and you're covering two different, quite honestly, geographical land areas. What Elena was trying to say a little bit ago is that there will be some potential overlap because again, at the end of the day, downtown Nacogdoches is within the confines of the city of Nacogdoches. And so there may be some, for example, one quick example was, what is the entry point of downtown? You all may think the entry point of downtown may be slightly different than what the committee thinks. Not that that's a bad thing, but if there is sort of that divergent idea, is how do we sort of come to consensus on the unification of what that really means. So we start working towards some of those things, but at the end, they're two distinct processes. But it's working with the same consultants, because what you all may decide is how we want to brand a process may be different than what the downtown. But at the end of the day, it's to get a result, something that's unified, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to call it that term, it's just the project, the product, the end product.
So all this is good. I think you all are reading a lot more. I mean, I just want to know, am I going to wear two shirts or one? I mean, are we talking about a downtown
Colors.
or and then a comp plan shirt, or when we're looking
Get a shirt and a bag.
or a front and back, or I mean, yeah, the back. But you see what I'm saying? These are real concrete. When you're asking us to think about this, or at least me, I get
Absolutely. And I think part of that is please fill out those documents. And then, because we do the consultants do have to actually be here, and they will be. And, one committee meets before the other. And so they're going to see the feedback that this group provided along with their group and come up with hopefully some agreement, and vice versa. You all will see it too. And so so we may have to teach, I don't know, Kathleen, maybe, but
maybe a point of discussion. Do we want to have one? I mean, does our group think we ought to have one that says, Nacogdoches rocks or whatever, and, and cover both of them? Or anyway, that's the question. And it's hard to do it on a survey. I think
the discussion is good to have.
Yeah, right.
It's just, I just wanted you all to know that regardless, even on the downtown, yes, they're going to use their creative juices because they do create brands, and they're going to have some options to bring back to those respective committees and say, this is kind of the recurring themes we heard. We kind of encapsulate these in these 3 to 5 different options. What do you think fits best? And maybe it's a combination of some of those. And my ask would be that when we bring that forward at the next meeting, that we try to galvanize around an idea so that we can at least finish, actually get something approved so we can move to the next topic of discussion. So we could spend all day about branding. I mean, honestly, brands everybody has an idea. They're all great, but at some point you gotta land the plane is the thought.
I've had some discussion with the down code committee. There needs to be some point where we meet together or joint meetings. Who knows? Maybe we walk downtown together, or if we're talking about how our plan interfaces with downtown entry points, talking about there's really interesting things if you look at the downtown plan that would affect, I think, the overall comprehensive plan and how traffic flow would come through town, that need to be talked about together. And so I think at some point that's going to happen. That just may not happen until later in the process. So maybe we need to have this branding discussion earlier if there's going to be if it doesn't make sense to have a unified brand that would work for both projects. But I agree. I think there needs to be some consideration. something that can easily be adapted for everything, or is it going to be too specific to the current planning process? So,
No, I would say that, so often in any government work that you might be involved in, or even community work, usually once a decision has been made to give something to someone, it's rare that they ever ask people from the city to participate in any discussion. So to me, what is encouraging about it is that they care enough to take input from us. And then I think that will go a long way with us having a better understanding of, what we'd be doing together, and can make it be good for the town besides just the plan itself. So maybe that will get rid of, or to me, it should get rid of some of the initial feelings that you had from, those other groups. So it is rare, I think, when a group will, after they've gotten a contract, would care about your input. So I think that's encouraging.
well, and I agree with her. So, whether we like the contract or not, I guess we have it, and so we need to make the best of it. Same thing that you said, Kathleen. Make sure this process isn't wasted. So, this group is an advisory committee, but I think has a lot of the potential to put a lot of sway, or put their finger on the pulse of what's going in town, and when we come back with a recommendation or have a concern with the process, hopefully that means everyone's going to listen. That's what we've been put in place for. So I know if they're not listening, I know Larry will be at the city council talking about it.
Let me say one thing about that.
Yeah.
What my comment was at city council was, we needed the plan.
Mhm.
And I'm here to work on the plan.
Mhm.
Whether there's a contract or not, I'm here to work on the plan.
And I appreciate that. I saw a hand back there in the corner, didn't I?
The downtown committee, have they gone through this exercise?
Yes.
They did go through, okay.
What might a downtown brand sound like? I mean, what might they come up with? Downtown Nacogdoches or?
Right now, I think the idea is it's gonna be one thing. I don't think we weren't discussing when we were being positive, discussing having two separate ideas.
Okay.
But now that that's come up, maybe we should, I don't know.
Let's just try and focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as this goes, I just want to get through the questions. So if there's any other themes or that come to mind that you all think we should consider, and it could be something about our heritage or something about local natural resources or industry or something like that. Could be about education, who knows? But if you have anything you think would be a unique identifier from Nacogdoches. Then we get on to the real hard-hitting questions. What colors do you think would make the most sense? And which colors do you think we should avoid? A lot of people said orange on this one. On why?
What did Larissa say? What'd you say on the colors that had been used?
So the city typically uses blue, just because it's a nice neutral color, and we have tried over the last, I would say, 10 years to incorporate more purple to be more inclusive and promoting us a bit more. And I think the downtowners voice both of those, and then the color that the downtown grows. Within the same.
Confusing.
I think it should be maroon,
Some of them did.
like Maroon land. Like Aggie land. No, just Aggie land.
Hate to,
Can you do like a
hate to have us be
red and a maroon or something? Yeah, a little
Yeah,
tag.
purple, orange.
Yeah, we can do that. Be all inclusive. Is camo camo color? You know, hey, hey, there's a lot of that anecdotes. So, yeah.
That's my answer.
We're,
We won't go say that.
Oh, that's true.
It's funny.
Can we make some kind of comment about Aggies not being allowed to speak here or something?
Oh,
Just
I
kidding,
have no problem.
just kidding, just kidding. Only T separate.
now you're starting to get, yeah.
All right, and then finally, any iconic symbols, architecture, features of this city would be useful in a logo or maybe as a kind of a concept. Maybe the university building would be one.
Of course.
You know, the old stone fort is extremely iconic, but we can't decide whether it's going to be in the town or in downtown. So, or, you know, it started in downtown. I mean, it's kind of, it doesn't seem to have a,
It's iconic, but it's also one of those things, I don't know if people would recognize your X logo, but you would of the university. Just because it's more distinctive. But
We'd be in favor.
just throwing it out. Maybe donut shops.
boy.
Now you're really,
vaping our way into the future.
There you go.
Writing it down, Brett.
So,
along with the hospital, with the.
I was trying to light things up for you.
yeah, on the colors, we should avoid, I don't know, I think there's probably, I'm not an advertising or branding person, but I'm assuming there's some colors that provoke a negative response in people. So, you know, Larry, are you in communications, marketing? Is that your background?
Communication.
Do you know of any research on any colors that provoke like a negative response?
Brad, no, he's nodding his.
Burnt
I
orange.
used this video called The Psychology of Color,
Yeah.
and it talks about that yellow makes people feel edgy and uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and red means murder or violence.
Yeah.
Blue is peaceful, green sort of peaceful. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there is a great psychology to colors and what people feel, whether they feel welcome or not.
And I'm assuming that the experts creating a logo on these things, but.
One would hope.
You know, you can't really go wrong with the good old red, white and blue. I mean, that's that's a statement of patriotism there. And, you know, that combination is relatively neutral. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Oh, that's true.
that's worth.
Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Have we, questions?
Yeah, just whenever you guys get ready to leave, just leave them at your places and we'll collect them and, we'll send electronic ones to those who can send today and have them fill it out, by the end of March. And we'll see.
We're gonna discuss the FAQs. We still gonna do that?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if anyone had any follow-up questions. I didn't get any emails or responses regarding the FAQ, so I'm assuming that means nobody had any additional questions on that. Just wanted to make sure, because we didn't talk about it last time. So just wanted to give another opportunity for anyone to maybe add anything, like questions that they've received from people that maybe aren't on the FAQs, or points of clarification.
Yeah, I did get a few, and I'm so sorry not to have given them time. I would either take out number 5 or either remove it or clarify, because it says, why don't we spend the money budgeted on badly needed water and sewer? And the response is, well, that has to come out of a separate fund. I think the general question is, why don't we spend it on other things? take it out because it just is kind of a trigger question. Because it could be spent on roads, it could be spent on salaries, it could be spent on code enforcement, it could be spent on a number of other things for the city. And I think that in particular, just highlighting that, I think is, is a little problematic. That's just my suggestion. And I had a few people comment and I didn't have time to send that in. So I apologize profusely for not getting that back to you.
Anyone else?
Either remove or clarify it, that it could be spent on other.
No, I think we can definitely provide some clarification.
You don't have to do it now, just take it later.
I was just moving on to the next,
Okay, great.
Is that a thing that a lot of people brought up though, like as far as the infrastructure issues?
Yeah, a lot. Well, and people are always talking about roads and why can't we repair? I mean, if you were in my spot, you'd see roads just as much as water. And also like now people are asking about traffic enforcement because, we've had a lot of traffic deaths and all those. There's a lot of other ways that the city could. And I'm just saying, just take that out so we avoid that whole, because it's a sore spot. And I just assume not, and moving forward here, I just assume to avoid sore spots, We all collaborate to have a good plan.
Well, when we left off last month, thank you for your patience, by the way, on that Zoom meeting. We had gotten down to, but a few sections reviewing the goals. Housing neighborhoods and historic preservation. Where we were left. So we're going to go through housing neighborhoods first. And then we'll do historic preservation. And if anyone has any comments on any of the other sections that you shared last time or thought, what time today as well. So first off, so first off, these are the ones. So, all right, housing neighborhoods, writing quality housing options that are appropriately available for you and current residents, affordable. Any thoughts on that?
The talk I've heard is people are worried about mobile homes and stuff, or there's newer construction techniques. So I'm just curious about that. I'm not against or for it or anything. It's just that you do need to address it probably.
Yeah. We have existing mobile homes in the middle of town.
Yeah. But I know there was one house built up on Appleby Sand that people were surprised about because it was a mobile home, but it went into a single zoning. Do you know what I'm talking about?
okay, so.
And that became a controversy.
So bullet point number 4 actually talks about the recognition of manufactured housing as a viable, affordable housing option. So that's actually identified as a separate kind of goal here. Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of talk about that. So just to very briefly provide some point of clarification, that's not a manufactured home. It was actually a site-built home that was built out in the county, built to our residential building code standards, and then moved into the city. So I know it doesn't look like the traditional site-built home, but the city, we aren't allowed to regulate building materials or aesthetics for those types of development. And so unless you're in a neighborhood with deed restrictions that regulate architectural style or things like that, then the city doesn't have any enforcement authority as far as like the exterior, what it looks like. But it is respected by the city. It is built to our residential building code, just like any other traditional single home. It just doesn't look like what you would. So just for clarification, but and number 4 actually of that type of manufactured housing as a viable alternative.
Well, yeah, I think those two things kind of think we all, affordable housing is a good thing if we have it.
Yes, so housing diversity could see townhomes, duplexes, like the size of single-family homes, patio home styles, something what we typically see either, I think a lot of what we see in that notice is either multifamily, like the large complexes, or the large estate kind of single-family home. There's not a whole lot of in between. So I think that's the part of meeting the alternative design, how to style, things of that nature.
That's a good question. So if I guess like, where would like a Ashbury Court type community fit on that? Is that? I mean, they're single family homes, but they're like on very small ones.
And they have reduced setbacks, so that's more of your patio home type, smaller yards, like a lot of empty nesters, starter homes, things like that.
Is there an opinion about the manufactured housing that on there?
Well, there's certainly many types of manufactured housing available that many of us may not even be aware of that are there. Everything doesn't look like if you're
No, there's some real cool
some are really terrific. And we've had some brought to Addis Ababa one time that when the government there wouldn't allow our government people to have housing we brought in from Houston. And some of it can be better than Ashbury Court.
Yeah.
But it costs less money. I mean, we may not know all the kinds of things that are available. And in Houston, of course, they have some manufacturing of housing that is better than most of us might even know available.
And there's also what this calls industrialized housing, which it's prefabricated, so it's built in a manufactured facility and then moves to the property, but it's built to the same building code and building standards as traditional site-built homes. They're required to be on a foundation. They're just less expensive because they're kind of they're prefabricated, they're mass production, so they do tend to be more affordable. So that's an alternative to company. Anyway.
And there are many people now who are wanting these smaller homes that kind of an in thing with groups, we think of it most of the time as younger people, but I know some people who are just moving here that want to live on their family's land, and they brought with them some of the small housing units that are actually pretty nice. I totally consider that too.
So is there and there are a lot of people who live in manufactured housing, whether it's more so in the county than the city, but we still have Steel Street, there's a pretty big pretty big.
Yeah, the main distinction between manufactured housing and prefabricated industrialized housing is manufactured housing is built to HUD standards. And industrialized housing or homes are built to local residential building codes. It's a higher quality of construction, higher quality of architecture, and they tend to fit in more with the local community versus the.
What is the argument here? I mean, is it like, should we be for it or against it or?
Yeah, set a goal, should we recognize manufactured housing as a good alternative to traditional construction?
Probably what you're gonna have is neighborhoods feeling like they had a certain look to them, and now you're changing the rules on them. So that's where your discussion is probably gonna be.
Yeah.
I don't have an
And
opinion.
that was a goal from the 2003 plan, which I guess my thought is that's probably not going to be as, I don't know, if I were influence the discussion too much, but as a citizen, I would be kind of against manufactured housing as an alternative to an actual house. It's built on a foundation.
That's probably the common thinking among most people, I would think.
Yeah, part of it is
If I live in-
impact on communities, and part of it is I see, as far as, I think manufactured housing is a good deal for the people who make it. It's not a good deal for the people who buy it because it depreciates, unlike a house. Typically, I think lately we've seen the real estate market has maybe made that a little bit different. And generally, it doesn't go up the same way as a house would.
It actually brings that house value down, doesn't it? The house next door that was in that neighborhood, I don't know. What were you guys, I'm sorry?
So you would remove that as a goal? I mean, that would.
I don't know, is there a different opinion on that? Do we think?
Go ahead.
When manufactured housing is typically, what I think of manufactured housing is typically lower quality. And so look, exactly what you say, Ken, it depreciates faster and it costs more for upkeep, and eventually it becomes unattractive, it seems like. But at the same time, that may be all that some people can afford. So there's certainly the thought there. But with regard to housing in neighborhoods in general, I kind of wonder if there's a sector of the community that the housing need, of a certain price range or size or targeted at a specific age. I'm curious as to how we, through this process, how we influence that beyond just typical market forces. It seems like if a developer, saw an opportunity on a piece of, say, a 50-acre piece of property or a 20-acre piece of property, and he pursued, to put a street in, and he decided to develop that property to a specific price category, square footprint, so forth and so on. It seems like he would do that. If there was a need for that, he would have an incentive to do that and hopefully, make a profit in doing so. But I wonder, what's our,
How do we influence?
yeah, how are we trying to influence that process? Are we trying to identify is our goal to identify areas where there are needs in the community and then maybe try to encourage those? I just don't know, but I'm not sure.
Look at the objectives that go along with that. One of the objectives was to encourage strategic placement of manufactured housing communities throughout Nacogdoches based on appropriate zoning, location criteria, and development standards. So according to this plan, yes, the intent was to promote that.
And it would require a change to our current zone.
And that was one question I had. Somebody need to answer the question of what would a manufactured housing development, what sort of zoning would that require?
So manufactured homes are no longer allowed in the city as far as like new development. So we have a lot of existing manufactured home parks and manufactured home subdivisions that have been established, prior to our current rules. And so you're allowed to place new homes in those areas because they're already pre-approved. If you have an existing manufactured home, you can replace it for a new one if it's starting to deteriorate. But we don't allow manufactured homes in any of our zoning districts unless it's like a pre-approved established mobile home park area. I think some people get confused between manufactured home and industrialized home because they're both prefabricated. But one is built to a different building code standard. So we do allow industrialized housing in the city with a very extensive list of development standards to make sure that it fits within the character of the neighborhood wherever you're placing it, because it's built to the same building code. So we don't actually permit manufactured homes in traditional single family subdivisions at all.
So there couldn't be any manufactured home development in Nacogdoches, a new one.
Now, I'm sorry, yes, we do have a specific use permit process. But there's no zoning category that necessarily fits into. So you can't get a zone change for that. You have to go through a specific use permit process, which essentially requires a site plan to be submitted to city council as part of their approval, shows your density, your layout, your amenities. It's a very public, transparent, vetted process. Make sure that it's what the community wants and its appropriate location. And so we do have a specific use permit process for that, but that's the only mechanism where someone could build a new manufactured home subdivision. So that process in and of itself does come on with the goal of appropriate locations for that type of housing, because it's not allowed just anywhere. There's a very public vetted process for that.
Another one of the objectives on this was to encourage revitalization and increase standards for existing manufactured housing in mobile communities. Do you know if anything was done on that?
And I think it's on the next slide.
Well, this is one of the objectives under that. Yeah, that's an objective on that one. Do you know if anything was done on that? Was there any activity?
So I think it's allow industrialized housing, which is a prefabricated homes built to residential building code. But that's kind of an alternative. So while we haven't recognized manufactured housing because it's built to the building code, the city did adopt regulations to allow industrialized housing, which is still prefabricated and built to a higher quality standard. If that answers your question. So we kind of implemented this, but we're take products.
Well, this kind of focused on the existing, the manufactured home existing sites in Nacogdoches. And it was to encourage revitalization and increase standards for existing manufactured housing. So those developments that already existed.
Oh, okay. So the objectives that are under that.
Yeah.
So no, we haven't, we don't have any codes or anything that's been adopted to further that one. Now, whenever we have non-conforming properties or something that was built prior to our current code and they start making changes, we do require them to come into compliance. So that's one of those things is as people are making improvements to their property or as they're building something new, if there's something about that property that doesn't meet current code, we have a method to help bring them into compliance, whether it's landscaping, whether it's building setbacks, whether it's to do with building code. So we do have that mechanism, but that's kind of citywide.
So if there's manufactured housing that is moved out, or is there an encouragement to put industrialized housing in the place of the manufactured housing, or just replace the manufactured housing?
So if you're in an approved mobile home park or approved mobile home subdivision that's been authorized for that, then no. If you're just grandfathered in, so say you had a manufactured home on a single family lot, and then we changed our rules, so you can't do that anymore, but you're grandfathered. If you remove that building and don't replace it within 6 months, well, you lose that non-conformance and you can't put it back again. So there's incentives to come into current compliance by not allowing that to just perpetuate unless it's an area that's been approved for that use because it fits into the character or it has all the utility infrastructure that's needed. But no, there isn't necessarily an incentive to replace the manufactured home with industrialized specifically. But if you remove one, you don't put it back, and not in an area that's approved for it. Well, if you do put something new, it has to be something that's meets current code.
I was just, Ken, I thought your idea was good. Just remove that one goal and maybe have a broader goal about exploring ways to make sure we have increase not just housing, but home ownership at all income levels. And I think that would be something we could do. And that would take care of all of this, because if we're not interested in this and we're having problems with it, then they're going to do a whole housing study and hopefully they're going to come up with some brilliant new ideas about housing at all levels. So, is that okay?
I'd like to know, what, obviously driving through some of the neighborhoods, there's a lot of dilapidated structures and so forth. And I wanted to know what, and I see a need for more comprehensive code enforcement as it relates to deteriorated housing. I wonder what the city's role is so far as revitalization, and if the plan that this comprehensive plan is supposed to set forth a vision.
Yes.
It is supposed to cast a vision. And I'm not sure what we have here really goes in any detail as it relates to the older neighborhoods, like on the east side.
So
We're going forward, but we're not focusing on what has.
So you're talking directly about this one here on the next page, which basically protecting current neighborhoods, forcing work. And trying to incentivize people to develop in a way that is good.
And I think that first one up there also, well-maintained neighborhoods that promote nacogdoches the community with character and pride.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of goes to both of those.
I have just like you said, driving through some of the older neighborhoods, the Black communities, you see these little cookie cutter houses where someone is invested in. They have 7 or 8 houses. They all look the same. They're all faced the street, probably too close to the street. Doesn't seem like it's adequate parking, and it doesn't promote the good mental health of the residents living in those homes, I'm sure. And
Where would you
that would be addressed.
put it on the goal, or do we need a new goal? Or do we have it?
On the neighborhoods that are protected due diligently. Well, it may meet, evidently it meets the current code for the homes to be built.
Right.
are aspirational in nature, the way that they're written in order to speak to the overall vision. So we're going to go through the visioning process when we kick off public engagement, and then the goal could stem from that. And so we're trying to look at what are the current goals? Are those still a priority? Should we take them forward? If not, maybe those don't need to be incorporated in this future process. And then if there's a new goal that's not listed, I think we need to make a note of that. And so when we get to that process, we need to bring those forward and say, hey, here's the goals that we think are still important. Here's some other goals that we thought of along the way we want to incorporate that weren't in the current plan. So I think, yeah, and I think it could be a combination of things. I think the overall, having an overall concept of promoting high quality neighborhoods, and that can be through architectural standards, that can be through code enforcement. There's lots of different tools to help promote that.
These first two are in the same kind of section, which is creating and keeping neighborhoods in the comprehensive plans on page 8-10. And when you look under the objective and actions on it, the actions are kind of actually interesting. Promote incorporation of deed restrictions or covenants into established neighborhoods, along with the development of homeowners association enforcement. If that's been done, maybe a new subdivisions, where it's easier. Maybe you have one owner and then you can create restrictions from scratch. I don't know if we've had any overlays or anything.
So we might want to change that. I know that's not quite a big goal, but instead of homeowners associations, neighborhood associations. Because since this, there now has a new connotation on homeowner associations, which charge you fees and all that.
Yes.
It's neighborhood associations, and there still isn't a great interest in that to develop them. I can tell you that.
I think they were using it as kind of a legal term, like, yes, somebody can actually come in and fine you if they don't have don't do what the rules are.
But I think we should make a note of that to change.
But it's funny because then it talks about developing a voluntary neighborhood conservation overlay district designed to place additional maintenance, character, use, and appearance restrictions on the properties within the district. I'm assuming most people are not, that has not happened because that's a big thing to do. To come in and say, hey, I want to keep this neighborhood the way it is, well, here's how you can do it. But you have to voluntarily submit to this new rule regime, which would probably be a tough ask for a lot of places. But we do, when I was serving on the historic landmark commission, you would have occasionally single property owners come in and want to add their property to the historic district, to the overlay. So they would have to, and subsequent owners would have to follow the rules of the historic overlay, which is very restricted on what you can do with the outside of the house. And that is at a personal risk to them that it's going to devalue their property to a subsequent buyer because somebody comes in and they can't remodel it anymore. So there are people who would be interested in doing that, but I don't know about an entire neighborhood. Everybody on Mount Street, for example, would want to get together. It'd be hard to get everybody to agree on a rule that would be common. But that wasn't one of the action items of this goal. So I think the goal, though, I think what I'm hearing is everybody agrees that's a good goal. It's just how do you get there? Maybe these action items are not.
Look at it in a measurable way.
Right. Can you actually, is this like a pie in the sky kind of thing? Like, hey, this would be great, but it's never going to happen.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I am aware, and I'm sure some other people on this committee are aware of, there are some programs, a recent program, Habitat for Humanity is no longer, I understand, but the Mission Act, New Horizons, so there have been some recent programs come to light that basically have, people have contributed monies and they have gone out and targeted specific needs in specific areas and made some pretty drastic improvements and re-roofed houses, repainted. And I guess my question or my comment and my question is that's clearly that I don't know how you incorporate that process into this comprehensive plan. If maybe you just acknowledge that exists and make it a goal of the plan to acknowledge it, number one, and then to promote it. But because I know it exists now currently, there's no guarantee that it will exist into the future. But I think it's a noble community effort that is actually taking place as we speak, and it addresses some of these things we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that. I'm just pointing that out. And
I think you're talking about Neighborhood Strong.
that's the one of them.
Right, and that's one in Mission Act and all that. But I think if we have that goal of ways to increase home ownership and to revitalize neighborhoods, and that can get into all of our neighborhoods that are really, I think that goal would cover it. And we don't have to do the action steps right now, right? We're just trying to clarify the goal. I had one we missed too, so
Yeah.
goal that I wanted to.
I was just kind of looking at the action steps to say, well, these are the overarching goals which seem good, but then we boil it down to what they said we should do for an action in this plan. Most of them are untenable.
But we will have an opportunity to look at action steps at another, correct? Okay. I just wanted to.
I think if you look at it like, why has nothing been done on this? It's because all the action steps are not doable. From a practical perspective. I mean, they sound nice though. So you have one on the other page?
Yeah, so I get confused back and forth on this. So I had one on the student housing appropriate to needs. That whole thing about student housing, there are almost, if not every neighborhood in Nacogdoches, almost every neighborhood. I think it's every neighborhood has an influx of students who come and rent whole houses. And that's a huge problem to everybody in their neighborhoods. So, and this whole goal and all of these, this was prior to when all that was happening, because they were talking about student housing right next to the university. So I think we need to make sure that we have somewhere in here that we address that problem of student rentals in neighborhoods, because it really breaks up a neighborhood.
Well, and a lot of those are in violation of current.
That's right. But we still need to figure it out, because there is, you know, and have codes and have, I think we probably need stronger ordinances that deal with it. But there's a lot of issues with the Fair Housing Act also, which I'm sure everybody's here is thinking, well,
They all went home.
maybe nobody's
They gave up.
We wore the city out.
for them. They're gone. But anyway, we need to.
Yeah.
So we need to address that and change that. That's all I'm just pointing out. We want to change that one. We need to address it. It's going to have a zillion little action steps, but that's an issue.
Yeah, and you know what? I think part of that, you're talking about the housing study. I want to understand how we have all these new apartment complexes that are focused with a lot of apartments, exclusively on students. Enrollment is down. Yet it seems like there's more students living in.
That's right. And
I like, what's going on?
And
The dorms.
and not just that,
We
there,
have a student here. He might explain that.
Commute from home. The big boy right here lives at the house.
the other impact it has is that it takes that house off of the market
Yes.
for the people who want to move in and work in higher paying jobs. So it's a whole cyclical thing.
We've had a trend in recent years of parents buying houses for students and having the students and their friends,
Exactly.
sometimes siblings, living in those houses.
Right.
In my neighborhood, there are probably about 3 houses that have college kids living in them. I know that some of my neighbors call the city to say, hey, there's unrelated folks living in this house, and they've been told there's nothing we can do about it.
So the reason I bring it up is because cities have addressed it. I've done some research on it, but this is not the place to figure out how to address it. But we do
That's a goal.
right. We want to address that in this comprehensive.
And I think that surrounding neighborhoods part addresses that.
Right, but then when you get back into some of these other things, it's promoting them. I mean, it would do it. It's promoting them in logical locations, but we just probably have to add part of in the goal and not in neighborhoods and not in, or something. I don't know how to phrase it, but I want to address
And
it.
I do think you're right. It's becoming a new person moving to town who's got a job with Pilgrims or something, from finding a house to rent or buy because everything is occupied and there's 1 students, because they can make more money from 3 students in the house.
Right. There's a lot written on this and a lot of different cities.
That's a viable issue. And
Yes.
with that goal, the way it's written, I think it's a good goal, but it probably needs to be more specific about that issue.
Yeah, sensitive to impacts upon surrounding neighborhoods and it's not just surrounding neighborhoods.
In the house, and the availability of single-family housing for non-students.
Or maybe instead of surrounding neighborhoods, just say all neighborhoods, because there's nothing, you're not surrounded anymore. They're there.
And back to your point about large apartment buildings that students are in, most of my students are in those kind of situations like Legends and stuff. And it's a generational thing, but right now they love that they get a room and it has electricity and water and cable and internet, and it's all one price for that one room. And so their parents just pay one bill. And that's what the kids like. They don't have to go to the water department, or they don't have to worry about rent, all that stuff. So they rent out 2 and 3 bedroom apartments in Legends, but each kid's parents pays for one room. So there's a lot less responsibility, which seems to be a trend in young people right now, is one price gets everything. Same way the university is doing for 12 hours is the same price as 15 hours. So that's why they're building those buildings. It's because it's very profitable to get $650 a room for a 2, 3 bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
That's $2,000 a month, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, and I know we are hitting 5 o'clock, but I'm free with you. What's this is historic preservation.
Yeah, we have historic preservation. There's 4 goals on that one.
Yeah, so anybody opposed? Preservation? Okay, then we're done. I think this is one you're actually doing pretty well. These with, when you look at downtown, we road away.
Do we have any information on like how much tourism is brought in over the last couple of years? Because like it's always been a big part of this.
Yeah, so
Just curious about the numbers.
yeah, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, they do an annual report to City Council, and then they have like, they have quarterly reports, and so that's information that we can share with the meeting.
Is it on the website?
I'm not sure, I'll find out, if it's not, then I'll give that information to you guys, but I think it is, yeah. I'll make it.
I would add also that we need to explore all of the histories in Nacogdoches. We definitely need that added here. So we have multiple histories, including
Yes.
African-American history, our history with Mexico, our history, and these need to be, I mean, Mabel, I think you brought up last time about the parks. We need to make sure we have historic preservation tied to all of the parks and all of the places we play. They need to see, this is the history here. We talked about Shawnee Street. I don't know if that's downtown or here, but you know, what is it called?
That's where downtown ends, remember?
Right, yeah, right. So that's the Wall Street, so we need to pay particular attention to that in historic preservation. We need a sentence about that, I think.
Yeah.
All of the histories and also our First Nations history. We are, even the preservation, even when we talk about anything on Mound Street, that's our First Nations history here. So we really have to be very specific and intentional in that, on this plan.
So another goal, then.
Pardon?
Celebrating all the.
That's right, celebrating, just not even preserving, but I like that, celebrating. I would like to change that goal to preserving and celebrating.
What you talked about a while ago, those little cookie cutter houses, that's maybe giving you a functional house, but it does not make it with the neighborhood that you come from, or that you were talking about. I wish we would find a way to encourage them to redevelop those historic neighborhoods in a historic kind of way. I mean, I've been in cities before, and this is an outrageous example, but Santa Fe is so beautiful because everything is, you have to build it the same way kind of thing. And then you go into Houston and you got a 7-Eleven next to a high rise and it's just madness. So I think we could point more toward that, build on areas.
It becomes a little Disneyland-ish in Santa Fe, because it's like the 7-Eleven looks like, it's like, oh, the Indians built this.
Yeah, it does. But your choice is,
But it has that charm of being original, and you can feel the history when you go in.
Yeah, well, the thing that's nice about it is it's like, hey, everybody's committed to our heritage. It's clear. Even if well, that's a new building. They're committed to it.
Yeah, I don't think they had wine bars back then, but that worked,
They had wine.
They had wine. Had more than one.
We make sure we add historic preservation and celebration of our history. I love
Like celebration.
what you said, Paul.
And to be honest, my concern with this, I don't have any issue with any of these four. I just thought it was a little,
Vague.
we should be focusing more on this.
Right. So we'll add that, explore it and do that, but
You know, there might be some specific historic architectural style that could be promoted, kind of like the Santa Fe style, or encouraged.
The building downtown, it's
Right.
really pricey to make it look.
I understand, but I'm talking about,
Which way not pretty, yeah.
I'm not talking about historical preservation. I'm not talking about in historical overlays. I'm talking about outside of that. But so that when someone came to Nacogdoches, they would see these iconic looks and identify, it'd be more like a branding and a Nacogdoches identity. Now, what that would look like, I can't tell you, but it kind of leads to what Brad was saying about the Santa Fe look. And that may be, there may be no way to actually implement that,
Part
but
of it, maybe one of the goals, looking at the carrot instead of the stick, but how do you incentivize people to do that?
right.
You have grants available that, hey, if you want to take the extra work to do this, we're going to help. I know there's some preservation grants that if you have a place downtown, you want to renovate it, fix it up, build, you can get some money from that.
and it covers all your costs, right?
In ground between a historic preservation and making you put in glass from 1895. That's where it gets expensive.
Right.
If you put in modern glass, but it still is within the theme of historic downtown, I think that's a problem at all. That's safe.
Yeah.
But also it could be unique to the neighborhood. If you study the neighborhood and try to, every time you remodel, you need to remodel sort of within the character of that neighborhood, then you get these beautiful little jewels that all add up to a city rather than just painting it all like Santa Fe.
Right.
So I was trying to be nice.
And I do think that there's something to be said for, you see this happen around weddings. It does updates, fixes their property, kind of contagious.
It does.
To that area. So if you can get things started down that road, you don't necessarily have to come in and wave a code or ordinance around. They're like, whoa.
Use the carrot. Use the carrot as opposed to the stick, if possible.
But it's like looking at the Zion Church like that, how long is that project been underway? Although it's like, I mean, I love the history and the architecture that we have, but 100% of all the buildings are not in a place where they can be rehabbed. I think that's a correct.
Yeah.
assumption. There's some that you're just not gonna be able to rehab back.
Well, and with that,
But you do want to keep that. I mean, look at how beautiful it is and like what it stands for. I mean, it's.
there is something still, you touch on a good point. These older structures, the actual preservation, that they were built at a time when the materials available were what they were. And they are expensive to maintain. Some of the reason why those beautiful houses on North Street are no longer there is because they
Afford them.
it just wasn't economically feasible to continue to maintain them, especially if they had gotten in bad repair. So I think it's easy to say we should have restored all these beautiful homes on on North Street, but at whose expense? And typically, you could be suggesting, well, that property owner should have done that. Well, he chose to maybe move that and put something else there. I don't know. I'm getting off in a sensitive area with that, but.
Yeah, really sensitive. I own one of those that owns me.
Exactly. So, yeah, anyone who owns one of those properties, and still you may fall into that category, understands that it's expensive, that there's a lot of money that goes into that. So that has to be acknowledged. It's costly.
Discuss.
Yeah.
And
That's difficult.
But I think one of the reasons to have a professional is they'll come in and figure out ways to help with the costs and stuff. So that'll come later on.
So, we were, before we adjourned, we were looking at the meeting schedules. We have, our next meeting is, I think it's on the 10th of March, that's smack dab in the middle of spring break. People. A lot of UNIS, SFA, people in the room. And so we were looking at possibly to the April meeting. And it might work out well because on the 24th and 25th of this month, 2 weeks from now, I guess, we'll have the consultants, the DTJ, civic grants people, I think, some of them are going to be in town to do kind of a kickoff.
When are they coming? I'm sorry,
4th and 25th
of
February.
February.
So we were thinking about having
That's good to know.
a.
Well, so those are tentative dates. They would like to come on the 24th and 25th if it works with everyone's schedule. That's not a conflict.
Well, I thought that was concrete.
So they have proposed to come in the February 25th, because that's the best available date for kind of their core team to come and visit Nacogdoches. And while they were here, we were gonna maybe do some driving tours, but we also thought it'd be a good opportunity for them to meet the committees. And so to actually have an introduction, let you guys get to know them, and that take place at the March meeting.
Yeah, so,
Is it an early meeting? That's the day we have
So
I'm on agenda and also Donna McCullough we've had before.
we have an established morning or afternoon. We are gonna get together afterwards and try to figure out what the best time of day is. We'll, if you guys have a time that works best for you guys, morning or afternoon, we'll try to work around everyone's schedules as best we can. But we might be one, just let you guys know. Handle the March meetings just because there's so much conflict with spring break, and two, use the 24th and 25th as an opportunity to introduce people to the group while they're here doing some other work.
and the idea is it wouldn't necessarily be, you know, I know everybody's got schedules. Work. But if you can make it, it'd be great. Maybe we'll have a reception, or maybe we'll have a meeting during this time slot. Give it FaceTime.
So
Process questions that we have.
When were you looking in April?
Oh, it would be, I think the standard time is April.
Yeah, second Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be the 14th, and that's the first day of Easter break for NISD and
March, Coast County,
Until?
the 11th.
see you next time.
And so we can look at that whenever it gets closer to those meetings. We just wanted to touch base about the March meeting.
Your turn, Dave.
Yeah.
So you guys know that look into it. Meetings anyway.
So are we are we really talking about March 24th? Is that what I heard?
February 24th and 25th.
February 24th, okay.
Yeah, not a, I think it's gonna be a more, it wouldn't be a meeting like this, it'd be more informal.
Yeah, it's like a regular meeting for looking through and reviewing the goals. This will be more informal, where you'll get an opportunity to talk to the consultants, ask them questions, get to know a little bit. They get to know you a bit. So it won't necessarily be kind of a in-depth working meeting like we have been.
And then nothing in March, is that?
No.
Right.
Can we put our names on this thing?
Sure.
If you want. No, that's it.
Elena, I had a question about the surveys we were filling out before. What was that for, about the priorities? Are you going to take those?
Yes, so.
And also, are they confidential? And I wasn't sure. I filled out one and I keep getting a notice to fill it out.
We haven't gotten a lot of, we only got half the responses, we decided to wait.
Yeah, okay, I think you're better off, I mean, it's really interesting to hear what everybody thinks, and so we're better off to actually talk it through. And, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on surveys.
Replace the conversation.
Right.
It was meant to we talked about it, and as we're talking through it, feel free to go in and identify those problems that still need to be taken forward, those that don't. And so that's just a tool to capture everyone's feedback as part of the discussion. Back to you guys, hey, this is what you guys told us as part of that discussion. So it wasn't meant to replace the discussion. To talk about it. We've had some deliberation. What do you guys think is part? Which ones should be taken forward? Which ones are still a priority? So that but it will include the contacts, that data. It'll just be numbers. So we won't, say, Larry King said this was still a priority or not. So it would be show, graphs, kind of distribution of the temperature of the group.
But just as a point of clarification, what happens is if we talk about it and then we know, well, this was important, this wasn't. But then if we do a survey, then does that mean now that's where we have decided, because we had these numbers, that this thing is included and that thing isn't? So that's just a question about how surveys are done and interpreted, and it's just a cautionary.
We don't need help with that advance notice, right? I think there's a couple questions.
Yeah.
That were brought up today about like, what was the process, and then is this the final discussion?
Right.
A lot of what we discussed in different ways.
Right. And that's a great point.
Help if we had like a couple days advance with information.
I think I would just be cautious about using surveys, period. I think you've got a whole discussion and a rich discussion, and people have good ideas. And so what you don't want to do is after we have this discussion and then have everybody say, now what color? And then it's like, because or now what are your priorities? Because then you're weighing something that you weren't really discussing.
I think it's just meant to document, capture everyone's ideas. And so we're going to have to group discussion. Everything that's going to be put in a formal report until this group is look at it. So it's literally just meant to document and capture y'all's input, and it's not meant to be a survey in the sense that, well, the majority of the group said this, so this is what we need to do. It's just meant to document the feedback and present that to you guys in visual form, and so that way we can have another discussion about it.
In my opinion, that's my opinion. There's some people who aren't going to talk and presenting, but we'll do the survey. But it might help to go, oh, a lot of people don't like that goal, but they don't want to talk about it in the meeting. And when you see that on the screen in a completely
tabular context.
just a data point, it might spur better discussion. That would help.
Yeah. And we are going to be creating a report to present to City Council that's going to include, hey, these are the priorities that they identified that we need to move forward. And so we do have to have some sort of way to document that and put it in written form to submit to City Council. So, but this isn't this survey that we're collecting. It's just data. We're going to bring it back, discuss it, provide it in visual form so maybe it's easier to digest, and then we'll go from there. So if you haven't filled out already, please do so. And once we get everyone's completed form, we'll bring it back to you guys and present that information. But we won't necessarily provide any names. We'll just show the numbers.
I've attempted the survey 3 or 4 times. I'm like, I'm going to do this. But it's like, it says you still support it, you don't support it, or what, I forget the 3 answers. But I was like, well, obviously I'd like, it's like I'm not against the fire department. It seemed like it was an either or kind of thing. It's like, do you want a fire department? It's still a priority, or no, it's not, it was like really general for me. I couldn't come up with an answer.
So categories are
Still a
this is
priority.
still a high priority. This is not a priority anymore, or I don't have any strong feelings either way.
Right, but it was like housing, still a priority?
Maybe
Don't have any strong feelings. I'm like, well, I was like answering yes to everything. I believe in everything, so.
And that's perfectly fine. These goals are still really good goals. I think there's a lot of good goals in here that should be carried forward. And so it's not meant to be a critique of, break down every single element of every single goal. It's, hey, generally, is this goal still a priority? Yeah, housing's still important. Maintaining quality neighborhoods is still important. Some of those things I think will never change.
See, if they had questions like, do you want to rezone the city? I would be like, no, you know?
Yeah, that's like that's almost like getting the second level, the objective.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, because we're not, and we kind of touched on a few today, but yeah, the objectives start talking about that.
Yeah, because I was
Developing
like,
a zoning plan that blah, 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 and you're like, now I have an opinion.
yeah. Well, that's good to know because I kept going, I'm answering yes on everything.
I think it would be good also, as Steele pointed out, that we saw those before we come to the meeting. That we would have some time to look over.
Yeah, so the quicker you submit them, the quicker I can share them with the group. So that's.
I submitted.
And maybe if we get to like 80%, that's good. We're about 50 now.
So there's a reason that you only have 50%. And so you want to get in exploring that. And that's really where I was trying to go, but it doesn't, we're not.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people may have just wanted us to wait till we ended the discussion, but maybe some people already had their opinion formed and they wanted to go ahead and submit that, and that's fine too. But if I'm going to have an opportunity to bring it back, talk about it some more.
And I think part of the reason is you get so many emails that it's easy to miss for some people. I know I missed it for a couple days. It's kind of buried in my inbox.
You missed which?
Just survey.
Yeah, I had to go back and search for it because there were so many.
I got the survey. What I didn't get was this comprehensive plan branding questionnaire. That was the one that seemed to create the tension today.
Didn't get that either.
Did you send this out ahead of time, Elaine?
No, because we didn't get it until late, and so that's why it wasn't anything intentional. So we apologize. The intent is always to get your stuff out sooner rather than later. So this was something that wasn't put together in advance.
So you said, email.
Don't that was left.
I don't think you. No.
All right, well, thank you. And did you?
Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have a good meeting.
Dr.
Good to see you.